Studies of the county jail found the 42-year-old structure needs serious expansion and renovation to effectively serve the community for the next 30-plus years. Recently, we spoke with the director of jail services, David Shook, to learn what options are available and the potential costs.
Hello, I'm Jim Demma with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you so much for meeting with us.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Let's start with some quick background information. When was the main jail built?
Our main jail here in Clark County was built in 1984 with 300 beds.
300 beds. Okay, what is the jail bed capacity today?
Today we have 519. They've added different spaces, they've added more bunks, we've actually opened up H-Pod, which was a minimum security area, and so today we have 519 beds available.
Okay, now what is the expectation of the bed needs over like the next 30 years?
Sure. Yeah, so in corrections, it's really difficult to have a person in every bed, right? Because not everybody gets along. And so you have to have a fluctuation of that. There's this general rule of an 80-20. In newer facilities, it might be an 85-15, where 15% of your beds are vacant, right? And so you can move the population around depending on behavior, depending on violence or concerns for their own welfare, things like that. And so as we continue to look, the many studies that we've done, whether it was in CFAC in 2018, 2019, or even previous, it started with 1,200 beds. And I think the number is somewhere around 850 to 890-ish. And we're in that same realm or ballpark with our own studies that we've done since 2023. So again, that's an estimated for the next 20 to 40 years, depends on the law and justice system, depends on the courts and the prosecutors, law enforcement, their activities, and how efficient our system is with getting individuals accused of crimes through the system. So that's the number that we're targeting in our projects and estimates and moving forward for the next many decades.
So since the jail was built in 1984, how have correction services and best practices changed? And does the current jail meet those standards?
Yeah, so our current jail, we've got things stacked in every corner and crevice and location throughout the jail because there's just not enough space. Corrections practices have changed because of ADA and constitutional lawsuits and other things that have said you can't treat people that way. You have to serve them this way, or you have to provide them the same services that any other citizen on the outside of the facility would be. And so what we've done is we've moved different locations around the building to add more medical service. We've moved different groups into different spaces because we need a bigger space for the inmate population. And so because our inmate population is more sick today, whether it's mental illness or medical conditions, is a lot of those basic needs for us as our first priority, right? There's an epidemic with fentanyl, right, and overdoses, and that's incredibly dangerous. And so the amount of death that happens for somebody who comes into a correctional facility and then is released again after you've not been taking fentanyl and all those different things is incredibly high. When we first started in 2023, we would have an overdose and it would take 1 or 2 doses of Narcan, which is a medication that will reverse the opioid effects. Mm-hmm. I just recently heard 10 doses here with the strength of this fentanyl, right? And so 23, we had 17 overdoses of inmates and no deaths, and 5 officers who were impacted or affected by that drug, and again, having to give them the same medication. And so again, medical care, some of those basic needs of our human population are the things that we're mostly focused on today because our housing is older style, right? It's a very dark and really it's a jail. It is a true jail. But that also affects mental health issues. It affects my officer population who's having to spend, 16 hours a day sometimes in this jail. And so again, as the population's gotten sicker, as our staff are having to do more to care for this population, and our job is really to get them through the criminal justice process, to help them get to the courts, help them get to the professional visitors who show up, and then get them out the door whenever the courts tell us it's time to go, whether it's off to another institution or whether that's out the door because they've been released from whatever efforts at the criminal justice and involvement. So, yeah, it's really changed over the decades for sure.
Okay. And what's the status of the jail work center?
Yeah, so the jail work center was built in 1999, 2000. Originally, they wanted to have 400 beds down there. They ended up with 200 beds.
And this is over by the port property?
Yes, this is down by the Lower River Road on the port. Anyways, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and really when COVID happened, a lot of our lower level criminals were released and said because of COVID we had to not have so many inmates. The other part to that is we had less staff, we had a lot of vacancies from whether it was just attrition or we weren't able to hire folks. And so the less staff you have, the more you have to consolidate, right, your inmate population, because again, you need to have security. That's one of the very first priorities for us, right? And so that inmate population that was down cooking and doing different industry jobs, we didn't have. The other parts of that is work release. That became less and less of a priority. And so again, when we moved back to the jail, that inmate work center down there was closed down, and we were using it for other administrative reasons. We actually use it as a training center right now. We've got staff down there. They're mostly down there all the time. However, a couple years ago, we started looking at this build for the larger jail. And when we were at Washington County, we talked about hey, how could we build a pod like this on our work center property? And there were some estimates, and we're like, gosh, this might be a doable thing to help with this phasing of a larger project. And so, again, about 8 months ago or so, we started building that. It's about 2/3 of the way done. It's expected to be finished by the end of this year, and sometime in January, we're going to go down and kick the tires and check it out, make sure everything's working the way it is, train the staff on the facility and how the efforts are there. And then sometime in the first couple of months of 2027, we'll have 64 new beds to add to this correctional system here.
Okay. And these would be for lower threat individuals?
Medium security.
Medium
so
security,
there's minimum, medium, and maximum security,
Okay.
and this is that middle level. We need more of those types of jail spaces and beds for the type of population that we're having today. So.
Okay. Now, the County Council recently held a work session where members discussed either a partial or full jail remodel and funding options for facilities and staffing.
Yeah.
What direction did the council give you regarding what type of facility, partial or full?
Yeah, so again, the partial and full options in this renovation is the difference of about 150 or 175 beds. It doesn't take away some of the critical things like a new sally port and booking space for our officers to more efficiently come in and come out of the facility. Oftentimes they get stuck in that process and they're there from a half an hour to an hour and a half sometimes. So we want to get them back out to the community to do their job. And so making that a little larger, adding an acute mental health ward and a place for a better detoxification and observation unit for those that are experiencing that in the medical ward. Those are some of the things that we're adding. And then a transitional housing. We have 62% of our population that are in for less than 72 hours. Right now, we have to send that population up into general population, so contraband and other issues happen, where we want to be able to house them separately and let them get through that initial process, determine whether they're going upstairs or they're going out with pretrial release opportunities that they may have. And that will help with a lot of that initial transitional efforts. So when we were talking about what's the difference between a partial and a full, the partial takes care of all that critical stuff, does that remodel, adds the courts, all the things, and then that full is that north parking lot. It's actually building just general population housing in there. And it's set up in a way that we could do that in the future. And so my recommendation after listening to some of the market surveys and talking to the county manager and really listening to the population about taxing and monies and the economy and all that stuff is this is still a dire need for this community, right, for public safety. But we need to be able to have this conversation. And so that partial is what I recommended, and the county manager agreed with that we should recommend to council. So they had a work session. We shared that information. We shared the information we got back from our market survey with the public. And the initial thumbs up, and there's one more work session, I think July 12th or 13th. and then the council's going to make a final vote on July 21st. And again, the initial thumbs up is working towards a partial build, right, which will take care of all those really critical needs for us.
How would this enhance the safety of the public, staff, and inmates?
Yeah, so what it will do is the facility will be built differently. It'll be remodeled in a way that makes it safer for staff. It puts the right inmates in the right spaces, right? So again, we don't have to add everybody into the same spots. Because we have 21 individual living spaces today, it's harder for our staff to manage them because they're in smaller little slices where we could manage them either directly or indirectly, right? We could be in them. Right now, we have a remote management style where housing towers are actually not just next to the window and we can hear and see what's going on, but there's a hallway in between. So we have anywhere from 80 to 120 inmates that officers are paying attention to. And that makes it difficult when you're in this siloed effort where you can't really see and hear effectively. And so creating some of these safer spaces, putting the right inmates in the right types of housing in the first place, because you actually would have somewhere to put them. That's what's going to create some of the more safe opportunities. Right now, inmates, if they have to go from their housing cell or their housing unit down to court, our officers have to escort them. Right? We have gangs and other issues in our facility where they have fight on sight kinds of orders from their groups. And again, everything is that way, where if we did more of that independent, we had virtual reality court appearance places in location, right? It's less movement of that general population. So safety that way. It's opening up more lights and having more environmental opportunities for the inmate population to be able to not be in such a dark and cold environment, but to be able to hopefully affect their mental health and some of the things they're experiencing. Again, when inmates come, we have to care for their safety. That's one of the first priorities. Care for our own officer safety, and then the well-being of everybody. So it's a lot of different competing efforts there in how we change this location and the main jail as it is. Make it more effective for our staff to manage this inmate population.
Okay. So what is the cost range of this, the preferred alternative, and what financing options are available, and if this project goes to the ballot, is the county considering it for this November's election?
Yeah, so partial build is about $364 million. The full build, I think, was $392 million. About 14 months ago, when we had some estimate of final numbers, it went up about $20 million in just that 14 months. So again, escalations from all the different things. Currently, council, and again, in those next two work sessions and the final vote on the 21st, they're going to finalize some of the, whether it's levy lid lift, whether it's a bond, whether it's some of those things. We have an initial thumbs up from a majority of the council to move towards a November of 2026 ballot measure. And again, details will be finalized with the county council and county manager over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll have more actual details on what that will look like. So.
Now, will there be a separate ballot request for law and justice staffing needs on the November ballot?
You know, there's that conversation happening right now with the county manager and council. I think the July 12th or 13th is that final date where they're going to talk about the impacts of the sheriff's office getting more deputies on the road, you're right, the impacts of the rest of the law and justice community around us. Vancouver just added some officers. I know the smaller cities are adding officers the most they can, and so those are definitely discussions that this county needs to talk about, right, of how do we grow this jail to be the hub. The jail is truly the hub of the law and justice system. We don't control people that show up. We don't control them when they leave, right? That's the courts and the prosecutors. And of course, law enforcement brings folks to us. And honestly, there's so many aspects of that we're not able to currently do, right? Probationary service or Department of Corrections, we can't help them as much as they would love us to be able to help them for many reasons, right? We're not a part of a regional shuttle system because we can't be a hub. We used to bring in 600 to 800 inmates that were not ours, and this community was paying for that. Some were up to $100,000 to $157,000 a year. And again, we wanted to focus locally on our law and justice system and our law enforcement partners. So those are some of the things that we would love to get back to once we have a little more space to do it, because it helps the sheriff in his extradition efforts, not having to travel all over the country because they can get on these shuttle systems. And so again, as we're looking forward as council and the county management and executive office are working on what those other efforts are for our law and justice partners, I'm just going to let them speak about that. I'm really more about the jail and how that's what we're doing with that. So.
Okay, well, we've recorded this interview on July 8th.
Okay.
So people need to stay tuned. So if they want to find out more information about the jail expansion project, where can they check?
We definitely have the Clark County government website where the jail has its own website. We have some social media on Facebook and Instagram. And every day, in fact, today we were talking about our contact rooms and the lack thereof, and what do we do with those. And so again, there's stuff about our jail. So I would ask anybody to join those accounts. And again, we'll be having a larger effort to get out to the communities over the next 3 to 5 months to share this information, as well as make sure that everybody's aware of what's the critical aspect of this.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and good luck with the effort.
Thank you very much, Jim.